Hey, my name is Callum Reed. I'm 27 years old, born and raised in Manchester. But I packed up my life and moved to this quiet little village about an hour's drive away in the Cheshire countryside. It's one of those places where the streets are lined with old oak trees, houses have charming front gardens, and everyone knows your name after a while. I didn't come here looking for anything big, just some peace after a rough breakup back in the city. My ex, Claire, and I had been together for some time, but it all fell apart in a mess of arguments and unmet expectations. I figured a fresh start in a small village would help me reset, focus on work, and avoid any more emotional complications. Love was the last thing on my mind. I rented a modest house on Oak Lane. Nothing fancy, just a cozy living room, a kitchen with outdated cupboards, and a garden big enough for a barbecue and a couple of chairs. I work as an electrician for a local company, handling everything from fixing faulty wiring in old homes to installing new sockets in the few businesses around the village. It's steady work that pays the bills and keeps me busy without overwhelming me. Most days, I drive my battered old pickup truck to job sites, come home tired but satisfied, make a simple dinner, and crash on the sofa with a book or a program on the telly. No drama, no expectations. That's what I told myself I needed. Right next door lives Holly Bennett. She's 30, works as a librarian at the village's small public library, and from the first time I saw her, she struck me as the kind of person who blends into the background but leaves a quiet impression. She's petite, with short brown hair, always neatly tucked behind her ears, and she often wears oversized hoodies that swallow her frame, paired with jeans or leggings. Her hands always seem to carry a faint scent of fresh soil from the flower beds she tends in her front garden, or the musty aroma of old books from her job. The day I moved in, I was hauling boxes from my truck when I spotted her struggling with a heavy crate of books on her front steps. She was trying to balance it while fumbling with her keys, and without thinking, I walked over and offered to help. "Need a hand with that?" I called out, setting down my own box. She looked up, a bit startled, her blue eyes wide for a second before she smiled faintly. "Oh, that would be great if you don't mind. I'm Holly, by the way." "Callum," I replied, lifting the crate easily and carrying it up the steps. "Just moving in next door." We chatted briefly as I set it down inside her entryway, mostly about the village, how quiet it was compared to the city, and her job at the library. She thanked me with that soft smile of hers, not overly enthusiastic, but genuine, like she appreciated the gesture without making a big deal out of it. I didn't think much of it at the time, it was just neighborly politeness. But as time went by, those small interactions turned into something more routine. We'd wave good morning if we crossed paths while grabbing the newspaper or watering plants. One day, she caught me fixing a loose fence post in my garden and asked if I had a spare spanner she could borrow for her bookshelf. I lent it to her, and when she returned it later that evening, she brought over a plate of homemade biscuits as thanks. "They're oat and raisin," she said, handing them over with a shy grin. "Not too sweet, but I hope you like them." We ended up sitting on my front steps, munching on the biscuits and talking. She told me about the library, how children came in for story time and left with stacks of picture books, or how elderly patrons borrowed historical novels to pass the time. I shared stories from my jobs, the cranky old lady who insisted her lights flickered because of ghosts, or the family whose entire house wiring was a fire hazard waiting to happen. It was easy conversation, no pressure, no flirting. Holly had this calm way about her that made me feel relaxed, like I didn't have to perform or impress. After my breakup, that was exactly what I needed. Just keep it simple, I reminded myself. Friends with the neighbor, sure. Anything more? No way. As time passed, our chats became a habit. She'd bring over coffee in the morning sometimes, black with no sugar, just how I liked it after I mentioned it once. We'd sit on one of our front steps, watching the neighborhood wake up, talking about nothing and everything. Holly opened up a bit more, how she loved planting flowers in her garden because it gave her something to nurture, or how quiet evenings with a good book were her escape. I told her about Manchester, the noise of the city, and why I'd left. It felt natural, comfortable, like we'd known each other longer than we had. Her smiles were subtle, not flashy, but they made the days feel a little brighter. I started looking forward to those moments without realizing it. I didn't see it coming until the evening I'd driven back to Manchester to meet up with some old friends, but really, it was a coffee date with Natalie, a woman I'd matched with on a dating app. She was attractive, worked in marketing, and we had a decent conversation over lattes. Nothing earth-shattering, but it felt like a step toward moving on. When I got home, the street was dark except for the front lights. Holly was sitting on her steps, scrolling through her phone, wrapped in her gray hoodie. I leaned against the fence separating our gardens and called out, "Hey Holly, guess what? I had a date tonight." She looked up, her expression shifting from neutral to a forced smile. "Really? How did it go?" "Great, actually," I said, leaning in a bit. "Her name's Natalie. She works in marketing in the city. Smart, pretty. We clicked on a few things. Might see her again." Holly nodded, her eyes flicking away for a second before returning. "That's awesome, Callum. You deserve that. Someone who makes you happy." There was a pause, filled only by the distant hum of crickets and a car passing on the main road. Something in her tone felt off, like she was holding back, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I shrugged it off, said goodnight, and headed inside. But from my kitchen window I could see her still sitting there, absently touching the petals of a flower in one of her pots, looking lost in thought. It stuck with me, that image, but I pushed it away. Sometime later, I ran into Holly again on her front steps. The sky was overcast, a dull gray that hung low like it was about to unleash a storm, and the wind had a biting chill to it, even though no rain had fallen yet. I was out front tinkering with the loose boards on my front steps, nothing major, just trying to keep busy and avoid thinking too much about the nagging feeling from our last conversation. That's when she appeared, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, and her oversized hoodie zipped up against the cold. "You're at it again," she said with a small smile, handing me one of the mugs. "Thought you could use a break. It's fresh, black, no sugar." I took it gratefully, the warmth seeping through the ceramic into my hands. We sat down on the steps side by side, just like we had so many times before. The coffee was perfect as always, and for a moment it felt normal. We chatted about work. I told her about this one client, an older chap who tried to fix a sparking socket by wrapping it in duct tape and nearly set his garage on fire. Holly laughed, a real, genuine sound that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. It was the first time in a while I'd heard that laugh, and it eased something in my chest. But then, out of nowhere, she shifted the topic. "So, how are things with Natalie going?" I sighed, staring into my mug. "It's okay, I guess. We've hung out a couple more times, but I don't know. It feels a bit flat, like we're trying but it's not clicking the way I thought it would. Maybe I'm just used to something more familiar." Holly tilted her head slightly, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "Familiar? What do you mean by that?" I chuckled lightly, not thinking too hard about it. "I mean like, with you. Talking to you is easy, no pretending, no forcing it, just natural." She looked down, her smile fading into something softer, almost vulnerable. Her eyes glistened a little in the dim light. "That's because I care." She paused, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Because I love you, Callum." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, even though she'd said them so quietly. I froze, my mug halfway to my lips, staring at her. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees overhead, but everything else seemed to stop. Holly's face flushed and she quickly added, "I mean, not like that. Just everyone loves differently, right? Forget I said anything." I didn't know what to say. My mind raced, part shock, part confusion, and underneath it all, a strange warmth I couldn't quite place. We sat there in silence for what felt like ages, the only sound the distant rumble of thunder. Holly fidgeted with her sleeve, avoiding my eyes until she finally stood up. "I should go. Thanks for the chat." She turned and walked back to her house without another word, leaving me sitting there alone with my cooling coffee in a whirlwind of thoughts. That evening, I couldn't shake it. I sat out on my front steps as the storm finally broke, rain pattering against the roof in a steady rhythm. Through the downpour, I could see the light in Holly's living room window, her silhouette moving back and forth like she was pacing. Her words echoed in my head, "I love you." And that quick correction, as if she'd let something slip she hadn't meant to. Part of me wondered if I'd misheard, but deep down, I knew I hadn't. And worse, it stirred something in me, a mix of surprise, guilt for maybe leading her on without realizing it, and this inexplicable urge to hear her say it again without the backpedaling. I barely slept that night, replaying every interaction we'd had. Had I been blind to it? The biscuits, the coffee, the way she always remembered the little things. Were those signs I'd ignored? And why did the thought of her feeling that way make my chest tighten in a way that wasn't entirely uncomfortable? The days that followed dragged on with an awkward tension. Holly didn't come out much anymore. Her front steps stayed empty in the mornings, her windows shut tight even on nicer days. I tried to act normal, knocking on her door once with a loaf of bread I'd picked up from the bakery as a peace offering. She opened it just a crack, took the bread with a polite, "Thanks, Callum, I'm kind of busy today," and closed it before I could say more. Her voice was distant, her eyes not meeting mine. The silence gnawed at me. Without those casual chats, my days felt emptier, the house quieter. I realized then how much I'd come to rely on her presence, not just as a neighbor, but as someone who made the ordinary feel meaningful. And now, with her pulling away, I was left wondering if I'd ruined it all by not seeing what was right in front of me. After Holly's confession, an invisible wall seemed to spring up between us. Our easy conversations turned into stilted exchanges full of awkward pauses and forced politeness. She'd wave if we crossed paths in the driveway, but there were no more lingering chats over the fence. Her front steps stayed empty in the mornings, and I found myself glancing over at her house more often than I care to admit, wondering if I'd permanently broken whatever comfortable rhythm we'd built. The habits we'd formed, the shared coffees, the light-hearted stories about our days, the way she'd tease me about my messy toolbox, all vanished like they'd never existed. I tried to fill the void by keeping busy. Work picked up with a few big jobs around the village, rewiring an old farmhouse on the outskirts and fixing the lighting in the community center. When I wasn't on the clock, I'd tinker in my garage or go for longer runs, pounding the pavement until my legs burned and my mind cleared. I even reached out to Natalie again, setting up a couple more dates in Manchester. We met for dinner once, then a walk in the park another time. She was great on paper, funny, ambitious, with that city energy I'd once craved, but every interaction felt surface level, like we were both performing roles in a play we weren't fully invested in. I'd catch myself comparing her to Holly. Natalie's laugh was bright but sharp, not the soft, genuine one that made Holly's eyes light up. Natalie asked about my day, but it didn't feel like she was really listening the way Holly always did, remembering details long afterwards. When I got home earlier than usual, after a job wrapped up quickly, I spotted Holly on her front steps with a man I didn't recognize. He was dressed sharply in a button-down shirt and chinos, looking like he belonged in an office downtown. They were laughing about something, her head tilted back in a way I hadn't seen in ages, her smile wide and unforced. He reached out and touched her arm lightly, and she didn't pull away. I stood there by my truck, keys still in hand, a sour knot twisting in my stomach. Who was he? A friend? More? The jealousy hit me like a punch, hot and irrational. I had no right to feel that way. I was the one dating someone else. But there it was, raw and undeniable. I ducked inside before they noticed me, spending the rest of the evening pacing my living room, replaying the scene in my head. "Get a grip," I muttered to myself. "You're not even together. What gives you the right?" Some time later, I saw my chance to ask. Holly was coming back from the grocery shop, arms loaded with bags, so I hurried over to help carry them inside. Her kitchen was spotless as always, with a vase of fresh flowers on the table that she'd probably picked from her garden. We unpacked in silence at first, but I couldn't hold it in. "So, who was that bloke on your front steps the other day?" I asked, trying to sound casual as I set down a bag of produce. She glanced up, her expression neutral. "Oh, that was Chris. He works at the library with me, helps with the archives. He just stopped by to drop off some books I'd ordered." I nodded, but the words tumbled out anyway. "You two seemed close." Holly paused, folding a reusable bag with deliberate care. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "We're friends, Callum, but even if it was more, you don't get to be jealous. You're the one who told me about your girlfriend, remember?" The word girlfriend stung, even though Natalie and I weren't official. I felt my face heat up, a mix of embarrassment and frustration. "I'm sorry," I mumbled. "I didn't mean to, I just—" She cut me off gently, her eyes meeting mine for the first time in what felt like ages. There was sadness there, but also resolve. Look, maybe we need some space. Things have been weird since, it might be better if we just go back to being regular neighbors, no more coffees or late-night talks. I wanted to argue, to say that I missed those things, that the weird was my fault for not handling her confession better, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded dumbly and left, the door clicking shut behind me like a final punctuation mark. From then on, the distance grew into a chasm. Mornings without her good morning wave felt hollow. Evenings I'd sit on my front steps alone, staring at her darkened windows, wondering what she was doing. The neighborhood sounds, children playing down the street, dogs barking, seemed louder in the absence of our conversations. I threw myself into more dates with Natalie, but they only highlighted the emptiness. One night, after a mediocre dinner where we talked about work and the weather, I came home and sat in the dark, realizing I'd spent the whole evening wishing I was sharing stories with Holly instead. The regret settled in deep. I'd taken her for granted, and now that she was pulling away, I was left with this aching void, questioning if simple was ever what I really wanted. Time passed, each day a little heavier than the last. I'd go to work, climb ladders to rewire attics or troubleshoot flickering lights in someone's basement, but my mind was always half elsewhere, drifting back to Holly's house next door, now feeling like it was miles away instead of just a shared fence line. Her window stayed curtained most of the time, and if I caught a glimpse of her coming or going, it was brief, a quick wave from her car, or a nod as she checked her postbox diary. The front steps where we'd shared so many laughs sat empty, gathering fallen leaves. I told myself it was for the best, that space would clear the air. But the truth was, the silence only amplified the emptiness. I threw myself into distractions. Natalie and I kept seeing each other, drives to Manchester for films or casual dinners at cafes along the way. She was easy company, always ready with a story about her latest project at work or a funny anecdote from her friends. But more and more, I'd zone out, my thoughts wandering to Holly. One evening, after Natalie dropped me off with a kiss on the cheek and a promise to text soon, I sat in my living room staring at the blank TV screen. The house felt too quiet, too still. I realized I hadn't laughed, really laughed, in ages, not since before everything changed with Holly. One night, my phone buzzed with a text from her. "You up?" My heart jumped and I replied immediately, "Yeah, everything okay?" A few minutes later, there was a soft knock at my door. I opened it to find Holly standing there, her hair pulled up in a messy bun, wearing an oversized jumper that dwarfed her small frame, her face pale and tired under the porch light. She looked hesitant, like she might turn and leave, but I stepped aside and let her in. We sat on the sofa, the room lit only by a single lamp. She pulled her knees up, hugging them close, and stared at the floor. "I'm sorry if I made things weird," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "That day on the steps, I shouldn't have said it. Emotions got the better of me, and now everything's messed up." I shook my head, leaning forward. "It's not your fault. I didn't know how to handle it. I thought keeping distance would make it easier, but it's not. It's worse. I miss talking to you, Holly. The coffees, the stories, all of it." She looked up then, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I miss it too, but I can't keep pretending like it's just friendly for me. Being around someone and knowing they'll never feel the same, it hurts too much. If we're only ever going to be neighbors or friends, that's fine, but I need boundaries to protect myself." Her words hit hard, a mix of vulnerability and strength that made my chest ache. I wanted to reach out, to tell her that maybe I did feel something more, but the fear held me back. The fear of ruining what little we had left, or of jumping into something after my last relationship had crashed so spectacularly. Instead, I nodded. "I get it. Whatever you need." After that, the distance became deliberate. No more borrowed tools or shared treats. I'd see her car pull in after work, but she wouldn't glance my way. I'd mow my lawn and she'd stay inside. The neighborhood felt smaller, more confining, like the space between our houses had expanded into an ocean. I kept up with Natalie, even inviting her over for a weekend barbecue, but it felt forced. She'd laugh at my jokes, but I'd catch myself wishing it was Holly's quiet chuckle instead. One evening after Natalie left, I sat outside watching the sunset, the regret washing over me in waves. How had I let it get this far? Then came the moment that shattered everything. I got home from a long job, my truck covered in dust from a rural site, and pulled into the driveway. That's when I saw it. Stacks of cardboard boxes on Holly's front steps. A removal van parked at the curb with its back open, ready to load. My stomach dropped. I walked over slowly, my boots crunching on the gravel, and found her taping up a box labeled books. "Holly, you're moving." The words came out choked, disbelief heavy in my voice. She straightened up, wiping sweat from her forehead. Her expression a mix of sadness and resolve. "Yeah, my aunt in York is letting me take over her flat. It's closer to the city, and I think I need a change. Things here just don't feel the same anymore." I stood there speechless as the weight of it crashed down. York was hours away, far enough that our paths would never cross casually again. No more waves, no more accidental meetings. The thought of her front steps empty, her garden untended, hit me like a physical blow. "When?" I managed to ask. "Soon," she said softly, avoiding my eyes. "I've been packing for a while. Didn't want to make a big deal out of it." I wanted to argue, to beg her to stay, to admit that the space had only made me realize how much I needed her in my life. But all I could do was nod, mutter something about helping if she needed it, and walk back to my house. Inside, I slumped against the door, the regret turning into a sharp pain. I'd pushed her away, and now she was leaving for good. The house next door, once a source of comfort, was about to become just another empty space, and it was all my fault. When the day arrived, the air crisp with the promise of change, leaves skittering across the driveway like they were in a hurry to escape. I stood on my front steps, watching as Holly loaded the last few boxes into the removal van, her movements efficient but heavy, like each one carried more weight than just belongings. The driver waited patiently in the cab, engine idling, while I hovered nearby, pretending to help but really just delaying the inevitable. My chest felt tight, a knot of regret and unspoken words twisting tighter with every passing second. When she finally closed the van's back door with a resounding thud, she turned to me, her eyes red-rimmed but steady. We stood there for a moment, the space between us feeling both too close and impossibly far. Then, without a word, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. I held her tight, breathing in the faint scent of her shampoo mixed with the earthy aroma of her garden. The hug lingered, neither of us wanting to let go first. Finally, she pulled back slightly, her hands resting on my shoulders. "Take care of yourself, Callum," she said softly, her voice cracking just a little. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small owl-shaped keychain she'd given me during one of our casual front step talks. It was silly, a cheap trinket from the library gift shop, but it had become a symbol of those easy days. "Here," I said, pressing it into her hand. "So you remember the neighbor who used to make you laugh every morning?" She closed her fingers around it, a sad smile tugging at her lips, her eyes shimmering under the light. "I won't forget." We hugged once more, briefer this time, and then she climbed into her car, the van ready to follow. I stepped back, forcing a smile as she started the engine. She waved through the window, and I raised my hand in return, watching as the car pulled out slowly, turning onto the quiet street. The van rumbled after her, and just like that, she was gone. Or almost. The vehicles disappeared around the bend, leaving behind an echoing silence that settled over the neighborhood like a fog. I stood frozen in the driveway, the world blurring around me. The knot in my chest unraveled into a sharp ache, and suddenly everything clicked into place. This wasn't right. I couldn't let her go. Not like this. Not without telling her the truth I'd been too scared to face. Panic surged through me, mixed with a desperate clarity. I turned and bolted down the pavement, my feet pounding against the ground, heart racing faster than I ever remembered. The street curved gently, and there they were, the car and van slowing at a stop sign just ahead. "Holly!" I shouted, my voice raw and echoing off the houses. "Stop. Wait, please." The brake lights flashed red, and her car came to a halt. The van driver honked lightly in confusion, but I ignored it, sprinting the last few yards until I reached her door. Holly stepped out, her face a mask of shock, eyes wide as she saw me doubled over, gasping for breath, sweat beading on my forehead despite the cool air. "Callum, what?" "I'm sorry," I panted, straightening up and grabbing her arms gently. "Don't go. Please, Holly, don't leave. I can't do this without you. Don't make my house feel empty again. Don't leave me waiting for a coffee no one else will make just right. Stay, please stay." She stared at me, tears welling up as a mix of confusion and hope flickered across her face. Then, incredibly, she let out a soft laugh through the tears. "You idiot. If you'd said something sooner, it would have been so much easier." I cupped her face in my hands, looking into her eyes, the world narrowing to just us on that quiet street corner. "I love you, Holly. Not as a neighbor, not as a friend, as the person I want by my side every day. You're my home, my peace, everything. I was too scared to see it before, but I see it now. Please give me a chance to make this right." For a heartbeat, time stopped. Then she reached up, her fingers brushing my cheek, and pulled me close. Our lips met in a kiss that was urgent and tender all at once, the kind that poured out months of unspoken longing under the shade of the overhanging trees. The wind rustled the leaves around us. A car passed in the distance, but none of it mattered. In that moment, we didn't care about prying eyes or small village gossip. We were finally honest, finally together. When we broke apart, breathless, Holly wiped her tears with a shaky laugh. "So, I guess I'm not going after all. We can start over, right?" I nodded, taking her hand in mine, our fingers intertwining like they'd always belonged there. "From today, my home is wherever you are." We walked back together, hand in hand, leaving the van driver to unpack with a bemused shake of his head. Back at our houses, now feeling like one shared space, we opened the front doors wide, letting the fresh air in. I brewed 2 cups of coffee while she arranged her flowers in the vase again. We sat on the steps, watching the sun climb higher, painting the garden in golden light. The seasons might change, but in my heart, a new chapter was just beginning. Now I know, if you find the right person, don't let them slip away. Chase after them. Hold on. Speak up before it's too late. Sometimes all it takes is a little courage, a hand to hold, and a kiss to rewrite your whole story. Sometimes the most profound lessons in life creep up on you when you least expect them, wrapped in the quiet rhythm of everyday moments. In my story with Holly, I learned that true love often hides in the simplest gestures. The coffee she brewed just right, the homemade biscuits shared on the porch steps, the easy laughter that made my battered old house in Cheshire feel like home. I was so caught up chasing what I thought I wanted, dating someone from the city who looked perfect on paper, that I nearly let the real thing slip away. It took the gut-wrenching sight of her moving boxes and that frantic sprint down the village lane to realize, if someone makes your ordinary days brighter without even trying, don't wait for thunderbolts or grand declarations. Speak up before silence turns into regret. Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about grabbing that one person who sees you, really sees you, and saying, "Stay, you're my peace." I almost lost her, and the ache of that near miss still lingers, reminding me that love isn't loud. It's the steady hand you reach for when the world feels too heavy. If you've ever ignored the quiet voice in your heart, or watched someone special walk away because fear held you back, know this: it's never too late to chase what truly matters. Now, if this story stirred something in you, maybe a memory of your own unspoken feelings, or a nudge to tell that special someone how you feel, drop a comment below and share your tale. I read every one, and they mean the world. And if you want more real-life stories like this, full of heart and hard-won wisdom from right here in the British countryside, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Let's keep these conversations going together. Your support keeps the porch light on for the next one. Cheers!